Hello and welcome to episode number 92 of Fight for a Happy Life, the show that believes even a little martial arts makes life a whole lot better. My name is Ando, and I am so happy we can spend a little time together. Today, I want to talk to you about a young man who often felt alone, frustrated, insecure, and scared. Yes, that young man was me. More importantly, I want to talk today about how I overcame all of that. Well, most of the time. Okay, some of the time. The point is, something happened to me. I had an experience that really was a pivot point in my life and put me on, I think, a much healthier path. And that's what I want to share with you today. Let's broaden out for one moment and talk about stress. There are stressors all around us all the time. You may think 2020, the year in which I'm recording this, was the most stressful of our lifetime, and you might be right. But let's face it, there's always stress, the harmful kind of stress, not the helpful kind of stress that makes us stronger and tougher. I'm talking about the damaging kind of stress that keeps us from growing, keeps us from learning, and keeps us from enjoying life. This stress comes through many different channels. I know this not just from my life, but from seeing how my friends and my family live their lives, and definitely from all the emails I get. I get emails all the time where people talk to me about leaving home for the first time or living alone. Maybe they're stressed because they've lost a business, lost a job, lost a loved one. Overall, the theme seems to be the ultimate stress of uncertainty. Not knowing what's going to happen from moment to moment in our lives. What we seek to remedy that uncertainty is control. That's exactly what led me to martial arts, a sense of I need to control something. If I can't control the world out there, I'd like to at least control me, my body. Can I lift my hand? Can I lift my foot? Can I take a breath when I want to? It's very important that we live lives that are not afraid of uncertainty, that we feel we have enough control to navigate the waters, the dangerous, choppy waters of life. It reminds me, actually, of those old-time maps where there were known territories, and then off in the margins, it would say something like, "Here be dragons," or "There be monsters." That's how many of us choose to live our lives. We create a safe, known territory. Some people a little larger, some people a little smaller. And everything outside of that is a world of just dragons and monsters. And that leaves to living in fear and losing power to do much of anything. We give up a lot of the control that we could take back. So that's what I want to talk about. How do we manage the uncertainty? How do we gain more control? A couple of podcasts ago, I released an episode called 12 Tips for a Happy Life. And to be honest, if I died right now, I'd be very happy just having made that one podcast, because I do believe that those 12 tips answer a lot of problems. If you haven't heard that episode, go on back, take a listen. I do, because I'm a work in progress. But today I wanted to take one of those tips and just do a deep dive into it, really flesh it out, and let you know why I think it was such a good tip. And here's why. The tip simply was to look up when life is crushing you, when you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, when you feel small. Literally, take your head and look up. Now, automatically, that changes your perspective and gets you out of your own comfort zone. So I already like that. Specifically in the tip, I suggested that you look up at the sun, maybe getting up early and watching it rise. Or, I suggested, staying up late and just staring at the moon. That's exactly what I want to get into in more detail, because that's how my life changed a lot. Not on purpose, accidentally. And I'll explain. When I was a tween and feeling what tweens do, as we all do, insecure, a little unhinged maybe, not able to connect with the groups I wanted to, not making the strides I wanted to, worried about grades and family and girls and will I be able to afford a car someday, these kinds of things. I found relief through martial arts. Martial arts was a channel where I felt, okay, like I said, if I can't control the world out there, let me start with me. Maybe I can control my body. And so that's what I went into. No school, no teacher. Bruce Lee's books were my rough outline for what kinds of training should I be doing. So I'd go out for long runs at night. I would fill up my duffel bag with rags. That was my first punching bag, and I hung it up in the garage, and I would just beat the hell out of that thing. Again, mostly at night. School's over, dinner's over, family's doing what they're doing, I'm home alone. Perfect training time. So what often happened was, if I was out on the road running, it would just be me, essentially, and the moon. If I was in the garage, I didn't want to keep the lights on and attract the neighbor's attention. I was already making noise. So I would have the lights off. So all I would have would maybe be the moonlight coming in through the window. So without knowing it, I was building a relationship with the moon. Now, here was the important part, because I didn't notice that. I recognize that maybe this is just a little weird, and I'm just even lonelier than I thought. Because I should say, when I give you the tip to look up, the sun is kind of cheating, because the sun inherently is brighter and warmer than the moon. So that kind of gives you a head start at just feeling better. But I would challenge you to first make peace with the moon. You can go back to the sun for tune-ups, let's say. But if you can make peace with the moon first, something colder and darker and lonelier, then I think you're really making the progress that I would hope for you to make. Now, here's how it worked for me. Like I said, I would go out for my runs, I would lift some weights, I would beat up that bag, I'd sit there panting, and I'd just get all of my angst out. That's what the first value of martial arts was for me. Something just to get my, that feeling out, my insecurities out. Something to build confidence in, something to give me some sense of identity and a healthier ego. And then I would be exhausted. This was my release. And so what would happen was, after I was finished, I would open up the garage door and I would step out, and I was blessed enough to have a bit of a driveway. And then I would just lie down in the driveway and just catch my breath at first. And at some point, I would just find myself staring up at the moon in whatever phase it was in that night, or sometimes just a cloudy sky. But the point was, I would just be lying in the dark, staring up towards the heavens, usually focused on the moon. And in that time, again, not on purpose, I started having these experiences that eventually, I think, led me out of being a troubled human being into, I think, a healthier, happier human being. And it's still an experience that I reflect on and now seek out on purpose whenever I am feeling a little overwhelmed. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, let me share with you 4 lessons. That's right, I broke it down to an even number. 4 lessons that the moon taught me. The first lesson was a lesson in silence. Lying down in the driveway. I wasn't exactly living downtown, but I wasn't exactly in a suburb. So there was always some traffic noise or the neighbor's dog, or you can hear a family yelling once in a while. So there was always some noise. But definitely at night, if I'm hitting a bag at 11:30 in the night or midnight, it was quieter. And that silence in the environment allowed me to hear the noise inside of me. During the day, I think many of us go out of our way to find noise, to create activities, to talk to people, to be on social media, whatever it is to keep our brain occupied so we don't have to spend quiet time with ourselves. But that quiet time is quality time. We must feel comfortable sitting with ourselves silently. We have that idea about an awkward silence. Oh, I was having a conversation, or I went to an event, and then there was this awkward silence. I would suggest that if you are truly enlightened, there's no such thing as an awkward silence. Let's make that a challenge for ourselves, that every moment, every gap in between the noise of life, I feel very comfortable. I'm comfortable with nothing happening. I'm comfortable just breathing and just existing. I don't have to do anything to prove my worth. It's okay to be quiet. So that would be my first challenge. Can you sit in silence? The moon is very quiet. The moon says nothing directly. It allows you that space. Let's talk about the word space, right? We think about outer space, and then we can get a little more spiritual and talk about inner space. I would suggest that those two should merge. When you feel the environment, the outer space, is pressing in on you, noise, light, responsibilities, societal pressures, cultural pressures, religious pressures, you can feel that you have to keep tensing up just to hold it all out. But when you lie down in the driveway and you stare up at the moon, and it's all silent, and all that external pressure eases up, there's no more light, there's no noise, the grip of all of those cultural and religious and societal ideals drift away. It allows the tension that you're holding to relax and ultimately release. I sought, without knowing it, equilibrium with the space around me. I wanted to have the same pressure, equal pressure, inside of me as outside of me. Then you can really move in this world, I think, with your full power. If you're holding more pressure than the world is actually presenting to you, then you're always going to be too tight to do what you want to do at full power. So lying down on the driveway through the gift of silence, the silence of the outside world released the pressures. It allowed me to fill my space and let it just become one, if you like, with the universe. I know, hang on. This stuff can easily sound woo-woo. It can sound overly spiritual, but I would always come back to saying that it's incredibly practical. It's physical. It's mechanical. It is just as real as it gets. Lying on the pavement, staring up at the moon, hearing nothing but your breath, and then not even breathing very much, and just being there silently. If you haven't done that lately, please do. Lesson number 2 from the moon was a lesson in motion, in movement. Here's the thing. Because we try to keep ourselves busy, so we don't want to actually spend that quiet time with ourselves to really listen to the true inner voice in there. We create so much motion that, again, then we're afraid of stillness. So there's 2 phases that I went through, and I think we have to go through to really learn this lesson. The first phase is to stop the motion. Just like you stop the noise, stop the motion, and you lie down and stare at the moon. Okay, in this example. Yes, you can stare at a candle. You can stare at whatever you want. You can close your eyes. But stay with me on the moon, because I do think it's beautiful. So you stop movement and you become still. That's the first phase. You've got to feel comfortable doing nothing. You've got to feel comfortable turning everything off and just lying there. Look at the moon. Nothing is in motion. Everything is at rest. Almost like you're lying in a coffin. But you're not dead. This leads you to phase 2. You're not dead. You're lying there still, not making a noise, barely breathing. Nothing is happening to you. You're not moving. But then you realize you are moving. Maybe you do feel your heart beating in your back on the ground. Maybe you do feel your blood flowing a little bit. You do feel the subtle rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. You do feel the occasional blink, which is now very obvious to you. You blink all day, but you probably don't notice it. But when all you're doing is staring at the moon, you notice it. But beyond you, you notice the bigger movements at work. Maybe you see that the clouds are actually moving. If you just look up for a moment during your normal busy day, if you look up at all, you just see clouds. But when you're just lying there staring, even if it's absolutely slower than you can imagine, those clouds are moving. And then you realize that the earth is moving. You might even be able to feel it. You might even start to think that you can hear the humming of this whole thing spinning in space. But back to the moon. At the very least, if you lie there long enough, you'll see that the moon is making a path across the sky. And that's a beautiful moment. Because here's what happened. You went from surface movement and surface noise of the normal daily life. You turned it all off, turned off the noise, turned off motion so that you could become quiet and still. And then you break through to the other side where you realize there is always a little bit of noise out there and in you. And there's always motion. There's always movement out there and in you. But this is the kind of movement that is healthy to pay attention to. The normal dealings of your everyday life can be absolutely maddening, and they repeat over and over again. Most of them you won't even remember. But what state do they leave you in? Exhausted, tired, burned out? I liken it to the ocean. On top of the ocean, waves, whitecaps, storms, lots of boats capsized, people drowning, activity, noise. But then you go underwater, deeper and deeper, where it's completely dark and completely still? No. There are currents always running down there. There is movement and life way down there. We just don't usually see it, or we don't have instruments sensitive enough to view it. But I would say it's far healthier to always be tuned into the strong undercurrents that are going on in your life and pay less attention to the surface splashing. It's fun for kids to splash in the water. I think as we get older and wiser, we want to be able to submerge and go deep and ride the currents. That, I think, is the healthier, happier path. Lesson number 3 was a lesson in darkness. All right, now this one might sound a little crazy, but stay with me. Many people are afraid of the dark, right? Childhood, what's in the closet? What's under the bed? We fear the dragons and the monsters out there. We fear the boogeyman. We fear the monster under the bed. Symbolically, we fear the unknown. Back to that uncertainty. I don't know what's outside the window. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That fear, if we allow that to take root in ourselves, cripples us. It shrinks our comfort zone smaller and smaller until you have no playground left. You just can't create much in there. We seek to widen our comfort zone and shine a light, in a sense, into all of that darkness so that we're not afraid of any corner of our room. We know what's under our bed. It's my bed. It's my bedroom. To do that, you have to accept darkness. You have to accept the unknown. Lying in the driveway helps you do that. Lying at night and staring at the moon when everything else is dark allows you to be a part of the dark. There's no light on you, not any more than the bush that you're lying down next to or the car down the street. The moon is just shining this light and you're all illuminated evenly. And that's cool. I'll take it one step farther, and this is where it gets a little crazy. There was one point in my development, lying in the driveway, staring up at the moon, where in the neighborhood we had an arson going around. So someone had lit someone's garage on fire a few houses down, and that was a big news in the neighborhood. And then a couple weeks later, as my memory remembers it or gets it, another fire was attempted in a different garage. Someone had found it. Someone had tried to start a fire. It just didn't go all the way. And so there was a little bit of tension in the neighborhood about this arson at large. And as I was lying there in the driveway, in the dark, in the quiet, you would hear a bump in the night. You'd hear something a couple doors down. And at first, there'd be a little bit of fear, like, oh my gosh, is that the arson? Is that a criminal? Is something evil going on right now, right there? It wasn't in this case. But what occurred to me was, as I was lying there in the dark, was I can be the arson. I can be the boogeyman if I want to. I can be the monster in the dark. What power does the bad guy have? Only that they're comfortable working in the dark, unseen, lurking in the shadows. Why should a good person ever be afraid of being in the shadows? I'm not the boogeyman. I'm not a monster. So why should I be afraid to walk anywhere? I found that when I accepted darkness, the darkness of the world, literally, when there's no light, and I accepted the darkness that could be in me. Do I want to kill someone? Do I want to steal? Do I want to set something on fire? I accept that that's part of human nature, to have those feelings and to have the power to carry those things out. That I choose not to do those things is just a reinforcement of my identity that I feel I'm a good person. But it would be a mistake to think that you still don't have the power to do anything that any bad guy can do. Which means if there's a bad guy doing bad things and he thinks that the darkness is an ally, that I'm afraid to step into that darkness and meet him there, that's got to be a mistake. He's got to be wrong about that. And when you accept the darkness and give yourself time to be comfortable in the darkness, when you allow yourself the space to explore the feeling of being the monster under the bed, then you're not afraid of it anymore because we're on equal footing. Why should I be afraid of a bad guy coming into my house at night when it's my house? He doesn't know where everything is. Why would I turn on the lights and make it easier for him to see what's going on and where everything is so they don't trip into things and they can see what they wanted to steal? No, I would rather keep the lights off because I know where everything is in the dark. I'm part of the dark. Does that make sense? Does that sound crazy? Are you still there? Accept the darkness in you. That's all I'm saying. The fourth lesson from the moon was a lesson in belonging. I would like to believe that if we feel at home everywhere, then we will have as healthy and happy a life as humanly possible. It's when we feel that we don't belong someplace that stress really occurs. As a tween or a teen, if I felt I wasn't part of the popular clique, I didn't belong with them, that's stressful. If I didn't belong with the girl I was attracted to, that's stressful. If you sometimes feel like you don't really belong in your family, they just don't understand you. You don't feel like you belong in your city. You don't feel like you belong in your social group, your club, your school. You may not feel like you belong to this country, your country. You can quickly feel you don't belong part of anything. You don't agree with this religion. You don't agree with that political party. Everything seems like it's just not for you. And now that's really scary because I do believe we are social animals at heart, human beings. We want to belong. As much as I didn't get along with so many people in high school back in the day, as much as I did not feel comfortable going to any party or asking anybody out for a date, I wanted to. I wanted to be part of the gang. I wanted to go to the party or at least be invited. I wanted to be able to talk to any girl I wanted to. But no, it was mostly stress, 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 insecurity, insecurity, insecurity. And that ruins the whole experience of life, right? If you allow that to continue as a pattern, if you don't grow past that. So lying in the driveway and staring up at the moon, here's what it did for me. It made me feel that I belong. Not to any man-made group, not to any societal construct. I felt I belonged to the universe. Okay? Are you still here? I felt that this is my world, just as it's your world. I felt that I was born here. I'm going to die here. I live here. Why should I ever feel uncomfortable here? This is my home. Like it or not, this is it. So, isn't that beautiful? You belong here. You are home. It doesn't matter which house or apartment you live in. It doesn't matter who's with you right now. Look outside of them. Look up. You belong in front of the moon. You belong in this galaxy, in this universe. Your space extends into that space beyond your country, your religious beliefs. It goes beyond all of that. Accept it. Absorb that. Let it in and let it fill you up as you get rid of the tension out of your inner space and let that release into the universe. Now you have an open door to let in that sense of belonging. Lying in the driveway is how that insight came to me. Again, not on purpose. I would just find myself lying there night after night after night, even in the snow. It didn't matter. And it always felt like I was going home. It always felt like a Band-Aid. No matter how bad everything was going, I would first start my training by shouting at the moon, hit that bag, run those sprints, pretend that I'm beating up every bad guy in the world. And then I'd be so tired, I would just end up staring at the moon. And this is a process that I hope you will undertake. If not literally, although I hope you give that a try, because it worked for me, so that's the best I can do is offer you advice that worked for me. All I can do is hope that you find another way to find the same lessons. Lessons of silence, lessons of movement, lessons in darkness, and lessons in belonging. I think that endeavor will give you some rewards. I believe that you will have a sense of peace. You will have a sense of place. And once you feel so comfortable, peace of mind, and that you belong here, then you can devise a sense of purpose. Why are you here? What are you doing with your time and your resources? I think it all becomes much clearer once you shut out the noise, accept the dark and the light of the world, and connect with the universe. Find that equilibrium. That's where your power comes from. These are the rewards I think that you should give yourself. And I hope maybe that's tonight. Go outside, find a safe spot, not in the middle of the street, not in a park that you're unfamiliar with. And don't fall asleep, not the first time. But just go out. Lie down, stare up at the moon. Tell him Ando sent you. And see what you hear. See what you feel. See if you've come to the same place. I think if you do, you'll find that you don't have to be afraid of any monsters because you know you can be one. You don't have to be afraid of the dark because you're part of the dark. And ultimately, after all that time staring up at the moon for inspiration, you're going to find out that you don't need to look up anymore. You can look in. You'll realize that it's not about the moon. It's also about the stars. And you're one of them. Stare at the moon until you realize that you're a star. I'm so glad I finally got all of that off my chest. I've been wanting to share my experiences with the moon for years now. It just never felt like the right time. But here at the end of 2020, it feels like the perfect time. Don't forget, my friend, the world can be a dark place, but you always have the power to shine through. So smiles up. Let that smile be your shield and your sword. Keep fighting for a happy life.